Welcome to Earlville Library District's Yarn Craft Club. Today, we're making knitting machine snowmen for Valentine's Day. If you're interested in joining us at the library to make your own, sign up for our in-person February 2023 dates. If those dates don't work for you, you're always welcome to bring your own materials, reserve our knitting machines, and use our YouTube tutorials to help make the project. Of course, you are always welcome to use this tutorial whether you are a patron of ours or not. We hope you find these videos fun and helpful wherever you are. I'm going to explain this whole project in its entirety, so if you've already worked with a knitting machine, some of this information will be familiar. Let's get started. Here are the supplies you'll need to make this project. The only thing not listed here is your 48-pin knitting machine. We'll be knitting one continuous tube for this project with the recipe of 35 rows of snowman color, 60 rows of hat color, and another 35 rows of snowman color. First, you'll need to load your snowman color onto the knitting machine. We like to use a silicone earplug stuck to the knitting machine right below the yarn guide that helps our yarns run smoother and with less static. The yarn glides over the silicone on its way into the machine, and we find it very helpful. This step is optional. We've also attached new row counters to our machines as we had trouble with the built-in counters keeping up. Aside from these two modifications, operation of the machine is the same whether you choose to add them or not. Crank your machine until the single white pin is directly in front of the yarn guide. With the tail of your snowman color yarn in your right hand and the working yarn in your left, hook the yarn underneath the white peg and drop the tail inside the machine. Then, begin slowly cranking the machine and weaving your yarn loosely behind the next pin, in front of the next, behind the next, and so forth until you come back to your starting point. Now, in the gap between your last pin and your starting pin, bring the yarn around the last pin and slide it down into the slot of the yarn guide. Continue bringing the yarn down the front of the machine and slip it into the desired tension hole. For us, the middle slot usually does the trick. I like to keep my yarn resting in a bucket beneath the machine and pulling loosely from the center. Reset your counter and begin slowly cranking your machine for the first few rows. After some knitting has built up on the machine, you can increase your speed if you're comfortable. Continue knitting like this for 35 rows. After 35 rows of snowman body color, you'll change to the hat color. Cut the current yarn off of the machine a few inches below the tensioner. Slide the yarn out of the tension slot and up out of the yarn guide. Lay the yarn inside the machine to the left of the white pin. With the new yarn, lay the tail in the same spot to the left of the white pin with the other tail. Slide the yarn down into the slot of the yarn guide and also into the second tension hole, or whichever slot works best for you. Reset your counter. Gently hold the two tails on the inside of the machine as you crank forward for just a few pins. Then, leaving the tails hang inside the machine, begin cranking again like normal. Make sure your yarn is feeding up from your skein loosely and freely. Continue cranking with the hat color for 60 rows. As your project lengthens and gets close to touching the table, reach inside the machine and fold your project up onto itself so it does not drag on the table. After 60 rows of hat color, change back to the snowman body color. Once again, cut the current yarn a few inches below the tensioner. Slide the old yarn out of the tensioner and up out of the yarn guide. Lay the tail inside the machine to the left of the white pin. Lay the tail of the new color inside the machine in the same spot as the other tail. Slide the new yarn up into the yarn guide and down into your preferred tension slot. Hold the two tails gently inside the machine and crank forward for just a few pins. Leave the tails to hang inside the machine. Don't forget to reset your counter and begin cranking normally again for 35 rows. Fold up your project as it gets long enough to reach the table. After those 35 rows of snowman body color, we're ready to remove the project from the machine. I like to measure out a tail that is twice as long as the length of the machine. Cut your yarn, leaving that long tail, and thread that tail onto a tapestry needle. Remove the yarn from the tensioner and the yarn guide. Lay the yarn inside the machine to the left of the white pin. Slowly crank your machine forward. This time, there won't be any yarn feeding into the machine, and as each pin sinks back into the machine, it should leave behind a loop around each of the sets of 2 pegs. Starting with the pegs after the white pin, insert the needle from the inside of the machine in between those 2 pegs in order to pick up that loop. Draw the yarn through carefully as to not disturb any neighboring pegs. Sometimes I'll place my finger on the neighbor peg to make sure it doesn't accidentally pop off. Repeat this process and pick up every loop on the machine this way. When you run out of available loops, slowly crank the machine forward to expose them. If you feel like you're getting the hang of it, you can try picking up several loops at one time before running your yarn through. Though definitely not necessary, this will help speed up the process. Keep going until you have picked up every loop. Now, you can set your machine aside as your project should be completely removed. Gently stretch out your project and turn it inside out. The right side of your work is the side that appears braided, and the wrong side is the side that appears like a bunch of little bumps. With the bumps facing out, find any areas where you've changed colors and tie your ends together. Tug gently on the 2 ends before securing a knot, though not so tightly that you pinch your stitches together. You can trim your ends a bit shorter if you choose. This will be hidden on the inside of your project either way. If you're familiar with these machines, the next part of this process will be just like making a hat. We're going to pull half of our project inside of itself so that we have a double layered tube. I like to reach inside, starting at the edge that has the longest tail, and pull the other edge inside so both of the edges meet on the same end. Line up the 2 tails and pull gently on each one to cinch each edge up like a drawstring. This just closes the hole a little and will make it easier to sew. You don't need to pull the hole completely closed. Once the tails are lined up and the hole is a bit smaller, we're ready to sew those 2 edges together. Thread a tapestry needle onto the outside tail and roll the very edge of your project forward so you can identify the loops hanging on the cord. You'll alternate sending your needle from right to left underneath one of those loops on the front and then underneath one of those same loops on the back. Continue sewing and alternating between front and back edges until you make it all around the hat. Just like taking the stitches off of the machine, you can load up your needle with several stitches before pulling your yarn through if you feel comfortable. This method grafts the two seams together so it looks seamless. Be careful not to send your needle through the middle of the strand of yarn. It should go completely underneath the loop of the stitch. If you split your yarn by going through some of the strands, pulling the drawstring we are creating will be challenging. When you have sewn all around the edge of your project, your two tails should line up right next to each other. Alternate gently pulling on each tail. You should find that the tails pull in opposite directions. Make sure to pull with the yarn and not against. Keep tugging and alternating until the hole is as small as you can get it without pulling so hard that you snap your yarn. Then, tie your tails together in several knots, thread a tapestry needle, and hide the ends between the layers of fabric. Your project at this point looks a lot like a big hat. Set the closed white end on your workspace and arrange the project so it will lay open in front of you. For weight to keep our snowman seating upright, we filled a sandwich-sized Ziploc bag with beans and rice. Press the bag and all into the bottom of the project. Then we're filling our snowman up to the blue hat color with fiber fill. Cut a long strand of white yarn and thread a tapestry needle. Choose a starting point at what you would like to be the back of your project and begin sewing big stitches around the border of the body color and the hat color. Leave a few inches of tail hanging in the back as you sew. This will create a drawstring so we can separate the head from the hat of the snowman. Continue sewing in and out of the project until you reach your starting point. Tie an overhand knot with both tails and pull snug. Hold the tails tight and take this opportunity to push any stuffing that may spill over into the hat area back down into the snowman. Once everything is in place, tie both tails to secure, thread a tapestry needle, and hide your tails inside your project. Like we just did, cut another long white piece of yarn and we're going to create another drawstring to separate the head from the body of the snowman. Thread a tapestry needle and take a look at your snowman to determine where you would like the head to start. I went sort of half and half here, but I think I like making the head slightly smaller better. You'll see the difference at the end when I show this one next to my original. You can choose to create your separation wherever you like. Like before, starting in the back and leaving a few inches of tail, sew large stitches in and out of your project all the way around in as straight of a line as you can. When you reach your starting point, tie the two tails together in an overhand knot and pull tight to cinch and tie several knots to secure. Thread your tails onto your tapestry needle and hide them inside your project. Now you can set your snowman upright and fold the blue hat portion down onto its head. To close up the top of the hat, we're actually going to use the strings we have left over from making a pom-pom. I chose the white yarn for this, but you can use whatever you like and use your pom-pom maker in your preferred size to create a pom-pom. For our tools, that means we open both of the wings on one side of the machine and wrap yarn around until the entire wing is full and that U shape is gone. Then, close the wings to hold the yarn in place and cut the tail. Repeat, loading the second set of wings in the same way. Close the second set of wings to hold the yarn in place and cut the tail. Now, looking at the tool sideways and with a very sharp pair of scissors, set the scissors in the groove in between a set of wings and begin snipping the yarn right down the middle. Cut through all of the strands on one side and repeat on the other. Cut a long piece of white yarn or yarn to match your hat color. You're going to be finishing off your pom and sewing together your hat with this piece, so be generous. Slide the middle of the strand down in the slot between the two wings and bring it all the way around the machine. Tie a firm knot, but not so tightly that it breaks your yarn. I like to flip the tool over at this point and tie another knot. Then I add a few more knots for good measure. Open the wings of the machine and separate it at the middle to free your pom-pom. Now, bring your snowman back into the picture and arrange its hat to your liking. Starting at the front of the hat, thread a tapestry needle with one of the tails from the pom-pom. Sew large stitches in and out of the top ridge of the hat until you come halfway around to the back of the hat. Leave that tail to hang in the back and thread your tapestry needle with the other tail of the pom-pom. Repeat the sewing process around the other half of the hat to meet in the back. Tie the two tails in an overhead knot and pull snug to close up the hat and send the pom-pom into place. Tie several knots to secure. Thread the tails onto a tapestry needle and hide them inside the layers of the hat. Now you can fluff your hat and adjust it to your liking. You can also trim your pom-pom if you like. You can definitely do this before you attach the pom to the hat, but during this video I just forgot. For the scarf, I cut a piece of fabric 22.5 inches long and 1.25 inches wide. I laid my scarf out on the table and placed my snowman in the middle before tying on the scarf. Trim off any excess fabric and snip a little fringe into each end. Warm up your hot glue gun and grab 2 buttons for eyes. Snip a triangle piece out of orange felt for a carrot nose. I like to plan out my pieces before I grab the glue. Once you're ready, just a dab of hot glue will keep everything in place. Also, here's my first example where the head is a bit smaller and potentially a little fuller with stuffing. You can play around with what you like best. I also don't think I pulled the division between the head and the body quite as tight the first time, so it left him a little more rotund. And that's it! Earlville Library District's Knitting Machine Snowman. Remember, for February 2023, we are offering 3 opportunities to come and knit these up with us in person. If you can't make it to one of our classes, feel free to give us a call and reserve our knitting machines to use in our conference room if you'd like to bring your own yarn. We have stuffing, pom-pom makers, and other tools to share. You can even borrow our tablet to watch this video at the library while you craft. Once again, we hope this video is fun to watch wherever you are. Check out our website at www.earlvillelibrary.org so you'll always know what we're up to. Thanks for watching!